Hi, this is Steve Lee with Universal Devices. I'm the Director of Technical Services, and this video is going to be a short video on port forwarding. Now, you'll have the ability to review it multiple times. I'm going to go through it relatively quick to keep the video short, but it'll have all the content that you need to do port forwarding for most routers, or at least give you the idea of how that process is done. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, we're now in the admin console of the ISY. We've clicked on configuration and we're in the system tab underneath that. This gives us access to our network settings. By default, the ISY is set to automatic Dhcp. What that means is the router automatically goes out and gives it an address. And it's going to have an HTTP port of 80 and an HTTPS port of 443. For port forwarding, we're going to use 443. In the event that you have something else that is on 443, maybe you have a DVR or some other system that's utilizing it, you actually can uncheck the DHCP box. You could change the number to something else, in this case 9. Maybe if you had a conflict of something and you wanted to set your other address to something other than 80, you could change the number to even 30,000. Then you would go back and hit save. This is only done if you've got a conflict with another device on your router that is using the same port and you're trying to port forward, and we usually recommend doing HTTPS ports for port forwarding, and you would just change it by making it a different number. I usually use 9 ahead of whatever the port is that I'm trying to do if there's a conflict. Now, if you want to set a static IP, this video isn't on all the possibilities of setting a static IP, but I will give you just some generalities. What you do is you leave whatever the IP address is. In almost all cases, your subnet is going to be 255.255.255.0. Your gateway is going to be the IP address of your router. Most likely, it's going to be something like 192.168.0.1 or 1.1 or 1.254. If you have an Apple product, your gateway might be 10.0.1.1. But it's whatever your router's IP address is. Then for DNS, you can either use your router's IP address in most cases, or a lot of times using Google's DNS, which is 8.8.4.4 will also work in there. Now, why would you do this? If you're worried about your IP address changing in your router, changing the IP of the ISY, then you would set a static setting in here. We'll do other videos on things like setting a static setting in your ISY, the pros and cons of doing that. So let's go ahead and move on. Okay, I've now logged into my router, and my router's address was 192.168.0.1. Now, the default login for a router that's a Netgear is admin is the username and password is the password. Now, if you've changed it, then you're going to have to put in whatever your settings were. Some routers on the bottom of them will have the login information, so if your router is different, you might want to look that information up. So, purposes of this is to give you an idea of what you're going to see when you go into a lot of routers. If you're in a Linksys router, the section you're going to look for is Applications and Gaming. This also is Cisco, same company now. You go to Applications and Gaming, and then you'll see an option for port forwarding. On a Netgear, you're going to go to Advanced. Then you're going to click on Advanced Setup, and then you're going to go down to port forwarding. Now, what I'm going to do in this case is I'm going to create and add a service. Now, a lot of routers are going to be this same process, and so I'm just showing this as an example of what it takes to do port forwarding. It's not always the same in every case, but the similarities are there. Now, you can choose based on a list here. If I know that in my case my ISY is 104, I can just select it by clicking on this, or I could have typed in 104. I'm going to give it a name, and I'm going to call it ISY. Now, where it gives you an option, TCP or UDP or both, choose both, and then the port that you chose. Now, the default port for the secure port for the ISY is 443. 443. 443. Now, I'm going to go ahead and hit apply. If I were to get an error message that said there's a conflict with that port, that's when you might want to change it to another port. And that's what I was showing earlier, where if you uncheck the DHCP box, it'll give you the option to change your port. So if, let's say you had to change it to something else, you could make it 9. Whatever you do here in the router, you want to make sure that your ISY matches. Then you'd go ahead and hit apply. Now, I already have that port forward rule in here. So if I go into my ISY, I can go right here and we can look at it. Let's say if I want to make changes later, I can go back and just say edit after highlighting it. And let's go see what the settings are set to. Alright, got ISY, I have TCP UDP, and in my case I did change mine to 9443. So I have that set here and there's my IP address. That's really all there is to port forwarding. Now I'm going to show you one other example, which is a website called portforward.com. And if you've got different types of routers that may not be shown in this video, I'll just give you an example of a resource that you can go to that'll give you some step-by-step on how to do port forwarding. Take care.